Well, welcome back to another episode of That's My Dad. Got Tommy Marshall here. Tommy's has one of the most incredible stories that I've ever heard. So, Tommy, kind of how this came about was you had spoken at a conference, I believe, that my dad had attended, and
Yes.
I told my daddy, said, I'm trying to get some people in here who can inspire young men, and I said, Daddy, I really think it would be good if I had some guys who had grown up in a difficult situation. And Daddy said, boy, you got to get Tommy Marshall, man. You just won't believe that story of what that guy has not only been through, but overcame and where you are today. So I got a feeling that this is going to be one of those podcasts where I do a lot of listening because you've got a ton of story to tell. And I think it's something that there are a lot of kids who are going to benefit from it. But Tommy is one of our script flipper stories too. He's turned things around, and we're going to get there. So I think, Tommy, the best thing I can do is just sit back and say, hey, tell me this story. I think it's a crazy story, but I think it's something people need to hear.
But it's an honor to be here, and I love to talk about it because of how God has flipped the script, the reverse look that I do teaching on. And I was raised here in the area, Gadsden area. Actually, my ancestors are from Southside, and we lived there till I was about 8-year-old. North Gadsden, 8-year-old there. But my dad was a great man. He really was. Had a heart. There's things I can get into. What he taught me how to love unconditionally, he did. And my mother was something else. She led the way for many years. But my life was, my dad came from a well-known family in the Southside area. Most all Southside knew him for good reasons and bad reasons. And when he's sober, everybody loved him. But my dad had an alcohol problem. He was a full-blown alcoholic, and he dabbled with some other drugs, some too, in his latter part or the middle part of his addiction road he was on. And that wasn't pleasant for me and my 3 sisters. My dad would tell me, his son, don't do what I do what I say do, but I'd watch him get just blown away with drinking. And he had buddies that would slip me something to drink too, and I was just a kid. Don't tell your daddy, but here you go, kind of things. So I grew up in that. When he got drunk, he was violent. But my dad got put in jail 11 times in 1 month for drinking and tearing the city up. They'd take him to jail. He'd stay in there a while, and he'd get out. He'd say he's going to stay straight. He'd get mom back home, then he'd blow up again. And that just went on and on most all my life. I'd see him do things, and my mom raised me in church. She'd take us to church and come home, take her beating on Saturday night. She'd be in church Sunday morning, just the way it was. Most phenomenal lady. I've never met nobody like her. And she would work at the church, clean in church, whatever she could do to get away from the environment. But she'd always be there for us kids when we got in from school or whatever. In the summertime, she'd balance whatever she had to balance. But I'm telling you that to say that she was a tremendous lady. But when I got 14, my dad told her, said, he don't have to go to church with you anymore. He'd go on with me. So I'd go to all his buddies' houses and places where they'd hang out and get drunk, and I'd play music because I'm a guitarist, I'm a singer. I'd play music for all the drunks and watch them react. And I've never seen grown men squall like a bunch of drunk men when you play certain songs. It's kind of humorous, but it's sad. And the one that they'd sing, and I got to note in that in my mind, Lord help me, Jesus, I've wasted it so. So that told me something, because I'd see grown men fall out on couches and in floors crying because that song says, Lord, help me, Jesus, I've wasted it so, help me, Jesus. I know we're limited to time, but see, my great-granddaddy, my daddy was full-blown alcoholics. They'd stay drunk 4, 5, 6 weeks at a time. But one day, my dad was also a businessman when he was sober. He stayed sober 8 years one time, had one of the most successful lawn care companies, sober 8 years. Won Landscaper of the Year in the city of Gadsden. But then he had an affair with his secretary, left my mama after 24 years, and it crashed on him. He went from having the successful lawn care company, a landscaper of the year, had all the big accounts like all the hospitals and things that he would do. He went from there in a barn, in a shed, sleeping on a dirt floor, lost it all. Mm-hmm. Went to drinking again like he did when I was a kid, staying drunk, solid.
Tell us about that day that you were at school. You were in high school and the principal came and got you.
But he was at AA. He worked it, and those were the seasons he could stay sober a little longer at the time, but he'd slip and go back. So he and I got to really, connect in ways there. But now I'm a freshman in Gadsden High School on 12th Street, the old school, and we'd had to leave. He had beat my mother. We had to leave. We go to my mother called her aunt, but she really wasn't blood kin, but they were like family, and they helped my mother a lot when my mother was young, because my mother's dad died when she was young, and her mother had some issues. They took us in because they knew if Mama ever needed it to be there, they'd take us in. Well, Mama would carry me to school, carry us all to school that morning, and I'm at Gadsden High School, Miss Wofford's class in the 9th grade. And here comes the principal knocking on our door, tapping on our door. Miss Wofford said, "Yes, sir." Mr. Beauchelle said, "I need to see Tommy Marshall out in the hall." Of course, all the kids, they thought I was in trouble, because I did get in a lot of trouble in those days, because that's what happens when you go through what I went through. But I went out in the hall and didn't know what I'd done, didn't know what was going on really, that he would want me out there. And I walked out into the hall, and we closed the door. He said, "Tommy, you don't know this, but I'm at AA with your daddy." He said, "And your daddy said he's about to die. He's been drunk 6 weeks, and he don't know if somebody don't get there, he don't know if he's going to make it." I'm 14-year-old. I said, "Yes, sir. Thank you for telling me, Mr. Beauchelle." He said, "I'm going to go sign you out, and you go help your daddy." Guess he thought I drove, because my dad, the way he was, he let me drive at 14. I drove all over the place. I'm sure Beauchelle saw me, Clarence Beauchelle probably saw me pulling out of school before in a car. But that day we were living with the Stricklands, and Mama brought me to school. I didn't have a car. But I ran all the way home. And I walked in that house, and my dad had been drunk for 6 weeks. He had the same T-shirt on. It was yellow. Of course, all the stuff that happens when you're drinking that long, and the stuff that he was just wallowing in it. And he couldn't get out of the bed. He was laying over on the bed, but he couldn't get up. He said, "Son, here's what he said when I walked in the door." I don't think I ever mentioned this to you. It didn't hit me, but I'm just thinking, when I walked in that bedroom door, he said, "I knew you would come." That's what he said. "I knew you would come." That's why he called Clarence Beauchelle. So I went in, and he said, "Son, I need to go to the bathroom, but I can't go myself." Now, this is the man that 3 carloads of police would come arrest him. They wouldn't shoot you back then. They'd try to manhandle you, and he would fight for hours, or for a long time. It'd take him a couple hours to get him, and he'd say, "Let me drink the rest of my whiskey. I'll go to jail with you." Seen that many times. I'm a teenager watching my dad do this role. And it just began to do things inside of me that messed up a lot of things. But they'd get him in the car and they'd take him to jail, because I know a lot of retired police officers that told me, said, "We used to hate to come arrest your daddy." His nickname was Big Sam at Etowah County Jail. So I'm wrapping my hand around his yellow T-shirt. You can imagine what's all in that shirt. And I lift him up, and I get him on the floor, and I have to balance him as he walked to go to the bathroom. He's holding up on the wall, and I give him some privacy, and he calls me back, and I wrap my hand around his shirt again, and I begin to pull him and help him balance. I get him back and lay him in the bed. And he's in that bed, and I get him his feet up on the bed, and I pull a stool up, and I sit on it. So I got to ask you, Daddy, I got to ask you something. He said, "What, son? Why are you doing this? Why are you destroying our family? Why are you beating my mother till she falls out on the floor? Little 5'2" lady. Here you are, the big man that you are. 3 carloads of police arrest you. tearing our house apart. He's tore our house up many times. And we had to run, sleep on park benches, in the back of cars, wherever we could till we could get a place to stay. Why? He looked at me, guys, that day. Scott, he looked at me and he said, son, I'm just trying to escape. And I said, what do you mean? He said, son, if I get drunk enough, if I can get high enough, I don't have to think about reality. I don't have to think about the things been done to me or the things that I've done to others.
So your dad had some tough experiences. I think you told me one time that he had been a victim of abuse, I believe.
From his dad and his mother.
And there'd been generations of that in your family. Four generations of abusive relationships and alcohol and
yes, sir.
Just tragedy. But you followed in your dad's steps there for a long time. Tell us about that.
I got married at 18 to the same woman I'm married to today. A miracle that we stayed together. First 7 years of our life was horrible. We had a child right when we got married, and I was pursuing music career. Why? Because my daddy, the one, if he's a good dad or a bad dad, if you're a kid, you want to please him. You want to do what you can that he would be proud of. He said, son, we can have what we've never had. This man's going to introduce you to people in the music industry. You can make money. You can sell records. You can get famous, and we'll have things we've never been able to have material-wise. What I do? I put my heart in it because that's what my dad said. Even though my wife suffered from it, my daughter in the first 7 years of her life suffered from it. Now, they knew I loved them, but I traveled. I quit my job I had in the city here. They didn't want me to quit because they said that we don't want you to, we don't want to lose you as an employee. I said, well, I got to pursue this music career. He said, well, if you get out there and it doesn't make it, you come back here. I said, all right. So I went on, followed that career, and it was going. So now I'm ready to sit down and sign the main contract. I done told my wife I'm going up here, I'm meeting with them on Music Row. We're going to do this thing. I'm meeting with music industry people. I'm meeting with the money people, Nashville Now musicians on my records and stuff. I said they want me to sign it, and if I sign this, we're going to be selling our house here. We're moving to Nashville. Of course, she was going to go with me. And I'm in that meeting, Scott, and I'm listening to all of their proposals. And all I got to do is sign that line. But the Lord began to speak to me. He said, you can have it, but you're going to lose your wife and you're going to lose your life. But I got up in the middle of that meeting with all those people in that conference room. I said, might as well quit talking about this. They looked at me. What do you mean? And that millionaire kicked back in his chair. Tommy, what are you talking about? I said, I'm not signing this. I didn't have the courage to tell him I was going to lose my life. But I did say, I don't want to lose my wife. And he kicked back in that chair. He said, is that all? We'll get you all the wives you want. And that's the way that music industry works for most. I said, not me you won't. I got the one God gave me. I'm going back to Gadsden. This meeting's over. And I came back home, walked in the door. My wife said, what are you doing here? Because I wasn't supposed to be home for a couple more days. I said, I turned it down. She said, I wish I could believe you. So I don't blame you. I wouldn't believe me either. Not from what I put you through in 7 years. She said, what are you going to do now? I said, that little girl sitting right over there on the floor, I'm getting her ready. I'm getting her ready Sunday, and we're going to church. I know that. And I said, when you get ready to come, you're a grown woman. I can't make you go, but when you get ready to come, that's where you'll find us.
Your daughter's grown up now, and you have.
Yeah.
Tell us about your grandkids.
Yeah, I got to tell you about them, boy. Woo, I'm proud of them. I wear the shirt. But my daughter and son-in-law got married, and they wanted to start a family, and they couldn't have children. They went and tested in all these places to see why, and all the stats, that don't matter right now. But biologically, they couldn't have kids, but they wanted kids. It wasn't long that I got a call from a lady. Years had gone by. I'm in full-time ministry now. I've left the tool shop. I'm in full-time ministry. And my daughter calls me and says, Dad, it's a relationship thing with some of her husband's side of the family. She said, we need to talk to this lady. Told me her name. I said, well, come on, baby, let's go. We went to my office at church. Here was a grandmother sitting in my chair, in my office chair right in front of my desk. And I'm hearing her talking about her son that's a full-blown drug addict. And she's raising one of his kids at that moment, at that time, because of his relationship with another lady that it didn't work out. And she said, the lady he's with now is about to have a kid, and I can't raise another kid. I don't know what I'm going to do. So, well, let's pray about it. Let's see what we can do. And but I wanted to help her because I know where she was at. I knew what she was going through. We got a phone call that night in my office saying that baby was being born. My daughter and I took that grandmother to Riverview because they were still delivering children at that time. Now they don't deliver children anymore. It's all at Gadsden Regional. We went and saw that beautiful baby. They held it up the window, her granddaughter. 4 months later, that baby came home to my daughter's house. Mm-hmm. And now my son-in-law, my daughter, and my 6-year-old granddaughter's in Gatlinburg. This little 6-year-old girl had her mom and daddy at Build-A-Bear shop in Gatlinburg. She said, Mom and Daddy, you go on up over there. I want to build you a surprise. Mom and Daddy said, are you sure? The clerk said, yeah, y'all go over there. You can watch us. I'll work with her. She built this little creation in the Build-A-Bear shop. She called Mom and Daddy, said, come over, Mom and Daddy. I'm ready to show him to you. Mom and Daddy came over. She had it behind her back. When they got there, she pulled out a pink penguin. She said, I want you to meet Happy Day. 6-year-old now. I want you to meet Happy Day. Push his belly button, Mama. Tara said I reached and pushed his belly, and there was a recording in Happy Day that said, thank you, Jesus, for my baby brother. And I get a phone call at our home. We still had a landline then. Now we all got a cell phone. But the phone rang. And my wife said, here, it's Nancy. Nancy wants to talk to you. Everybody knows the story. Even my grandson, 9-year-old, but he knows the whole story too now. Said, Nancy wants to talk to you. So I got the phone, and I said, yeah, Nancy. I know y'all been wondering what happened to me and where I've been. I said, you better believe it. We've been trying to find you, sweetheart. I want you to get plugged back in. Come on. What? We miss you. She said, well, I got to tell you something. I said, what's that? She said, well, I met a guy, and I got hooked up with him, and we went on a journey. I said, well, okay. She said, but I'm pregnant. And I told him, and he said he didn't want to have nothing to do with it, so he left. Now I'm all alone. I'm back, where I was, but now I got a baby on the way, and I can't raise another baby. And she said, I got to ask you something. I said, what's that, honey? Do you think that Terry and Tara's ready to adopt again? Mm-hmm. I said, well, I can't answer that for them, but I'm going to give this phone back to Patty, which is my wife. I said, and if we're supposed to be having a meeting, we'll have a meeting here soon. I got home. We had a meeting set up next day. 9 months from Happy Day. I can show you the figure. I can prove it. But 9 months from the day of Happy Day, baby brother was born.
Wow. You can relate to guys unlike I can, because I grew up with a totally different situation. My dad. But I want you to look into the camera and speak to that young man who's in the situation you were in, and give him some hope and a little direction as to how things can get turned around. You now have a wonderful family. You've given up the addictions, the alcohol, all that stuff, and your life is totally different, and your kid's life is going to be totally different from what you had. So speak to the young man for just a minute and try to give him some hope as we wrap up today.
I'll be honored to. Young man, I want to tell you, I know what you're going through if it's not a good situation. I've lived it. And I can tell you that if it is that way, go to the Lord with all your heart. I want to leave you with a thought here that I go back to that Jeremiah 1, chapter 1, verse 5, where he says, before I formed you in the belly, I knew you. You are wonderfully made. God's perfect plan was that your dad be in your life. But what I want to tell you is, when dad blows it, if he does, it's not over. God himself can fill the voids. Don't run. Don't turn to alcohol. Don't turn to drugs. Don't turn to any worldly measure. Turn to God.
We got one more little thing we want to share with you. You've flipped the script on your family, and where there's good seed sown, there's a good harvest, and we're gonna share a little bit of that with you.
I'm so thankful, and I love my father very much, and there are many reasons why, but some important reasons is that he is faithful, and he is always involved, and he's relevant, and he doesn't stop. And I'm thankful that I got to see a godly husband, and he was a great father and a godly father to me. And now he is a great papa to my 2 children growing up. And I'm very thankful for that. But guess what? When I was 7 years old, he made his mind up to come back to his first love, and that was God. And if he wouldn't have done that, it would have been another generation of brokenness, of addiction, of abandonment, of abuse. And I'm so thankful that he decided he was going to be a real man and remain teachable and allow other men to pour into his life. And now, years later, he's able to pour in to other men, from teenagers up into the elderly and all in between. He will lay on the floor and cry with them. He will counsel with them. He will give all he can. And I'm so thankful that he never stops. I love you, Dad.
He's a great guy.
So Tommy,
Not about where would they be if I hadn't did it.
That moment that you just had would not have happened if you hadn't made a decision that you were going to flip the script. And our whole purpose in this podcast is to inspire young men to know that they can do just like you did. They can flip that script. And the end result is moments like you've just had. So thank you for sharing your story, and I'm sure it's going to inspire somebody.
I pray it does, and we're going to keep on loving whoever we can.
Yes, and we hope we've inspired somebody. That's our whole focus here, is to inspire fathers to become great dads, to inspire people to flip the script. There is hope. You can turn things around. Even 4 generations of alcoholism in Tommy's family, and it's broken, and his children and his child and grandchildren have a whole different life because of the decisions he's made. So we're breaking cycles of generational fatherlessness. And Tommy, great story. I hope a lot of people will learn something from it.
Sure, Scott.
Thanks for being here. We'll look forward to seeing you next week with another great story.